Hello, my name is Caitlin Stredney, and today I'm going to be discussing the Colonial Pipeline cybersecurity attack. I'm also going to be answering what the Colonial Pipeline was, what the crisis was, any warning signs that signaled an impending crisis, the crisis management efforts put forth by the organization, if the organization's response was successful, and one additional thing that the organization should have done differently. So what is the Colonial Pipeline? Well, the Colonial Pipeline is one of our major product refined pipelines in the US. It became operational in 1964, providing gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel from Texas to New York. It consists of 4 main lines with several branches that make up 5,500 miles of pipeline. And daily, the pipeline moves about 3 million barrels a day. So what happened? Well, on May 7th, 2021, the Colonial Pipeline underwent a cybersecurity attack. The hackers used ransomware to seize control of computers and files that belonged to the Colonial Pipeline. So what is ransomware, you might be asking? Well, ransomware is a software that blocks victims' data so they can't access it or use it, then demand a ransom. In this case, the hackers asked for 75 Bitcoin or $4.4 million in ransom, or threatened to leak the Colonial Pipeline's files. The Colonial Pipeline shut down their pipeline operations in response to this, and that shutdown caused panic amongst motorists in the Gulf Coast and East Coast states. It caused gasoline shortages from motorists lining up at the pump and increased gas prices. So how did the attack happen? Well, the hackers are a cyber crime group out of Eastern Europe called DarkSide. We now know that DarkSide gained entry through a virtual private network, or a VPN. So what is a VPN? Well, a VPN is an encrypted, protected network connection that disguises a user's online identity. In this case, we now know that the Colonial Pipeline's VPN was not a multi-factor authentication. It was a single-factor authentication. Now, the difference is a single-factor authentication, you only need a username and password. With a multi-factor authentication, you need a username, a password, and either a third or fourth verifying identity. For example, when I'm trying to log into my email, I actually need a multi-factor authentication. I need to use my email address, a password, and then my email texts my phone and prompts me with a 5-letter and digit code that I need to provide to then access my email. It is also now known that the password was discovered in a batch of leaked passwords on the dark web. So were there any warning signs that signaled an impending crisis? Well, yes, there were. March 21st, 2021, 2 months before the attack happened, President Biden issued statements warning of an imminent cyber attack to warn all of America's large infrastructure and industries, organizations, and institutions. This included things like our fuel, our electrical, our financial institutions, and communications. There was another warning signal of a technological discontinuity on the account of the Colonial Pipeline. And what I mean by this is that this VPN that they had been hacked into was out of date, it hadn't been used in a while, and unfortunately was vulnerable. The technology today has been evolving, and Unfortunately, the Colonial Pipeline had not been evolving all security measures or ways to access their information. And if they would have kept things a little more up to date and a little bit more like strong cybersecurity, it's something that might have been avoided. So what were the crisis management efforts put forth by the company? Well, at 5 a.m. May 7th, 2021, a ransom note was found by a frontline employee that had appeared on a computer screen. The frontline employee immediately got his operations supervisor, and the operations supervisor was connected to bigger managers and leaders in the company, and thus shutting down pipeline operations by 6:10, just an hour and 10 minutes after the original note was found. So the CEO of the Colonial Pipeline, Joseph Blunt, said this: "We had no choice at that point. It was absolutely the right thing to do. At the time, we had no idea who was attacking us and what their moves were." So because of this, they gathered what information they had, which was limited, and they decided to shut down all systems. They ended up paying the ransom of $4.4 million, and the CEO announced the pipeline was operational again May 12th, 2021. In addition to avoid further crisis, the Colonial Pipeline also sent out physical eyes, people, via helicopters and boots on the ground to oversee the pipeline and to make sure that there weren't other hazards or safety issues such as leaks that had happened while monitors and controls were shut down for the pipeline. In addition, they also hired a firm called Mandant, that is a cybersecurity firm, that implemented sweeps throughout their computer systems to see how far DarkSide had probed and to prevent them from probing any further. So was the organization successful in their management response? Yes, I think they absolutely were successful. They utilized the frontline employee, who then went to the operations supervisor, who then put the wheels in motion to gather the information and respond quickly and decisively, shutting down all systems. And in the end, 5 days later, the CEO was able to declare the end of crisis. So one additional thing that they should have done differently was to be better prepared for a cyber attack. And they could do this by creating a cyber attack contingency plan. Now, what this would involve is organizing a planning team that is well-versed in cybersecurity and cyber attacks that will be able to assess the scope of the problems, develop a plan, test the plan, and keep the plan up to date, meaning that technology is evolving and their plan should be evolving with that technology. Now, this contingency plan can hopefully identify potential sources of cybersecurity threats and vulnerabilities and risks. If they would have had a plan like this before the cybersecurity attack happened, it may well have been avoided. So in conclusion, this Colonial Pipeline resulted in paying the ransom of $4.4 million, shutting down all pipeline systems, which induced panic buying along the East Coast states. The Department of Justice recovered the $2.3 million of ransom. And in the end, they were able to declare the end of the crisis. So what did we learn? Well, we learned that cyber threats are becoming more common, and even to great big companies and organizations, they can be victims of these cyber attacks. So what can we do? We need to be better prepared and well educated, because these hackers are doing the same thing. We need to be aware of our threats and vulnerabilities, and we need to take warnings seriously. And we can do that by having a plan in place. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation.